Good morning, Jane. Thank you for joining us at the Australian Institute of Management. What are your first thoughts on the Australian Institute of Management?
This has been a great event to come to and have people that really wanted to learn something at this hour of the morning especially.
What is intentional leadership?
Well, you know, some of the recent research shows that leaders set goals, but they don't set priorities. And so intentional leadership is about making sure you understand your priorities for this particular situation, because leadership is situational. It's about figuring out which strengths you can draw on to carry out those priorities. And it's also about realizing how you might get stuck as a leader, because none of us can do everything.
When you say get stuck as a leader, what do you mean?
With every strength that we have comes a weakness. We can either overuse the strength or it has a blind spot attached with it. For example, if you're a big picture person, you will overlook details sometimes if you're not either, especially if you're stressed, or if you're not intentional about knowing which details are going to be important in a role. So intentional leadership is about making yourself aware of those kinds of natural difficulties that you'll have.
So what are the tricks to identifying potential or detecting potential weaknesses in a leadership style?
Well, one of them is having some sort of neutral framework for looking at things. My favorite framework is the one that is underlying the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, the MBTI. And while you don't have to be an expert to use the other tools I have with the intentional leadership framework, that the Myers-Briggs does that sort of neutralizing of what we do well. It doesn't limit us, but just points out where we might get stuck. So that's one. The second is taking some time for reflection. Leaders are so busy, and to actually set that time aside to think through what are my priorities, are these the right priorities, if I do this, what am I accidentally overlooking, is really key to being a good leader.
Is it important for a good leader or a productive leader to individualise their own management and leadership style?
Absolutely. You need to lead from your own style. In Myers-Briggs terms, we call it leading from your type, but you can't get stuck there. You know, you've got all kinds of types underneath you, so you have to be able to flex to meet their needs, and yet you still got to be anchored in who you are. You just don't want to get stuck there.
Sorry, what are your top 3 tips to being an effective intentional leader?
Number one is being very aware that not everyone has the same communication needs as you, that they don't have the same productivity needs, and so flexing your style to meet the needs of those under you actually is one of the hallmarks of great leaders. The second is continuous learning, to really be open to knowing that you don't know it all, and to having those people around you that will say, well, Grant, that's an interesting point, but I have some other ideas. Can we put them on the table? And then the third is actually thinking about leadership in terms of polarities, that often things are in tension with each other. That for example, top-down and bottom-up leadership. You need both going on. You need to be hearing from those you lead, but you also have a role as, the top decision maker when things get tough or when people are in tension. So the Center for Creative Leadership considers learning to think in polarities, that both sides hold part of the truth, as the second most important thing in being a good leader. The first being open to learning at all times.
Thank you, Jane. Pleasure. Thanks for joining us at the Australian Institute of Management.
Thank you for having me.